Hey folks, Quill18 here, and welcome to another episode of our tutorial for Hearts of Iron 4 for complete beginners. Last episode, we started this war against Finland. We're going to continue to do that and continue to talk about warfare, but at the end of last episode, I mentioned the word supply, and we are going to be talking about supply in this particular episode. Supply are goods that your divisions need to do stuff. If we go into our recruit and deploy screen over here and look at our infantry division, we can see that our infantry requires 0.79 supply every day. If we look at our mechanized division over here, our tank division, this uses 1.44 supply every day. It's going to be things like, oh, we're going to have to relay some tank treads, get, your hydraulic pump fluid, your fuel, your different things like that. So these things need more supply than infantry. In there. So different divisions will need different amounts of stuff depending on exactly how they're configured. The amount of supply they use will be somewhat dependent on what they're doing. Moving, fighting, that sort of thing could change how many supplies are being used up. I think peacetime versus wartime can also affect how many supplies are used. I can't quote to you what all the modifiers are, but there's some sort of general thing like that. It feels very intuitive when you do it. And all those units need supplies every day to keep on fighting. Now, if for some reason a unit can't get supply, and we'll talk about how supply flows around in just a minute, but if for some reason one of your divisions can't get enough supplies, there is a grace period during which that doesn't matter. There's a certain amount of time for you to have to basically fix the problem before it becomes a problem. And I can't remember if it's 24 hours or 48 hours. It's something like that. And there's ways to modify it as well. If we look at our research screen over here and we go to our land doctrines, under the mass assault doctrine which we're working on, the next option here, pocket defense, actually would give us a longer supply grace, an extra 48 hours while being out of supply before the penalties kick in. And that out of supply minus 10%, this reduces, I believe it reduces the penalty that your troops would get if they were out of supply. Troops without supplies move extremely slowly and fight extraordinarily badly. And I think over time, not only do they have that modifier to combat, but I think it reduces their organization or their strength. I think it reduces their organization if they're spending a lot of time out of supply. But also strength is a factor of how much stuff you've got. If you don't have all your equipment, then your strength will go down, and if you are in an area where you're not getting supplies, you can't possibly get equipment. I might be getting it wrong which gets modified when you're out of supply, but basically, the thing is, if your units spend a lot of time without enough supplies, they will fight like poop and be very, 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 very bad. This supply discussion started off because I was saying, we've got these tanks, they're moving forward, they're being awesome, but they have sort of overextended their defensive lines. If Finland was able to move a unit into this province right over here, they would cut off these tanks that are pushing forward ever so boldly. And what would happen after that supply, that grace period, these units would be considered to be out of supply, so they would all of a sudden move very slowly and they would fight extremely poorly. They're out of bullets, they're out of gas, they're out of all those things. They're out of snacks, right? You can't fight on an empty stomach, that would be terrible. So they would just be total garbage units, and that therefore would easily be defeated. But one of the important things, and this has nothing to do with supply, but it's very related to what we're talking about here, when a unit is defeated, it retreats. So that's what's happening with this unit over here. It has been defeated in combat. It ran out of organization, so it is now retreating to an adjacent friendly province. They're suffering some losses. If we take a look at our war over here, right? This is our war so far. We have lost 1.9k manpower, and Finland has lost 6.5k manpower. So they're taking a lot more casualties than we are, which is good for us. But not all their troops die. At every combat, even if you lose a combat, only some of the troops have died. Most of them, the vast majority, will likely still be alive to retreat and then try to fight in the next province, okay? So, generally speaking, people keep retreating. If we were cut off over here, if Finland took this province, not only would we shortly all of a sudden fight like total garbage, the problem is once we would lose combat, we would try to retreat to an adjacent friendly province. If there's no adjacent friendly province for us to retreat to, those units would instead instantly die or be captured as POWs in combat or whatever. But in any case, they get completely removed from the game. They get chalked up as casualties, and that's it. Encircling an enemy which is what this is, you know, making it so they have no friendly territory to retreat to, and then defeating them is one of the most devastating things you can do in combat, period. It is very, very effective. So you want to look for opportunities to do that, and you want to avoid having that done to you. One of the things that makes tanks so great is because they move so quickly. If you're able to punch through a front line, they are very good at trying to encircle an enemy. For example, this one tank division over here, rather than having it push forward to Helsinki, what I could do is try to have it get behind enemy units. Well, I guess there's like water here or something. It's not, I can't actually get there, but we could do it this way. Have the tank continue to push through here, and then, oh, is this all... There's a bunch of sort of weirdly impassable provinces over here. Yeah, okay. Oh, that's a lake. It's hard to tell at winter. I think it'd be a lot easier to tell during the summer. But we can have the tank do something crazy like this and try to cut off everyone over here so that instead of retreating and then fighting and retreating and fighting, they would just fail to retreat and be overrun completely. So that's a thing. Okay, but let's go back to talking about supply. So every day, units need a certain amount of supply, and all supply flows out from your capital, wherever that may be. Now we're going to talk about map modes here. Over at the bottom right corner, there's a few different map modes. We've mostly looked at the default map mode. That's mostly your ground combat map mode. There's also a button for the naval strategic view where you can select your seas, select your navies, and do things there. We'll talk about navies in a future episode. And then there's strategic air mode, which we looked at pretty extensively last episode. But there's also a few more map modes over here. Now these are all mapped to your F keys on your keyboard. So F1, 2, 3, 4, 5, da 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 da. So the F4 map mode is the supply areas map mode. Now, these supply areas are a little bit funky because they're not the same as a state. Like, if I go to the ground mode, we've got a state here and a state here. But if I go to the supply map mode, both of these states are part of the same overall supply area. And these supply areas are defined in a few different ways. Some supply areas might be a single state. This one here is actually 3 different states, for example. This one here is also 3 different states. And that's fine, and that happens. But the way supplies get places, they flow from out of your capital to whatever area your troops are fighting in. And it tries to do it using sort of a shortest path, but also the path that can support the most supply flowing through it. There is a maximum number of supply that can flow through any given province on any given day. And that is a factor of the infrastructure in that supply area. And it's a factor of the total infrastructure in the entire supply area. So for example, Moscow here has 4 different states. If you add up all the infrastructure in all these states, so we've got 8 plus 5 is 13, plus 5 is 18, plus another 5 is 23. You can see the number 23 right over here. The number at the top, that's how much supply can flow through this province. Now, all supplies come out of your capital zone over here. So 82 is the most supplies we can ever flow anywhere because that's how much infrastructure there is in Moscow, period. If we were to build, and in this entire supply area, right, in these 4 states, if we were to build more infrastructure over here, we'd be able to flow more stuff. There's a handy dandy little button here to add more infrastructure to this supply area, and it'll build it. I think it tries to build it first in the provinces, in the states rather, that have the least infrastructure. So if we hit this button, it'll probably queue one up in one of these 3 provinces that have 5 infrastructure. But it doesn't matter which of these 4 it builds it in, because it's still going to add more infrastructure to the entire supply area. So infrastructure, to remind you, we had a discussion earlier when we were looking at building things. Infrastructure exists in a state. More infrastructure allows your units to move around a lot faster. It also enables you to extract more resources, and it tends to let you build buildings faster. But one of the big things it does for you is it does increase the amount of supply that can move through a zone. So if I mouse over a different supply area, we'll start to get arrows here, and sometimes they'll take quite odd paths, but this represents the most effective way to flow supplies to a particular area. So for example, to get to this area, it's taking this weird route because of the max number of stuff that can flow through. And you can see the numbers. If the supplies flow through here, it's got a cap of 79, 76, so that's the low ball number, all the way through here to there. Here it has a limiter of 69, which is why it's not flowing through there. If we were to add more infrastructure in this zone and allow more supply to go through this area, actually I guess 50 is the cap, actually. 50 is the cap for transferring through here, which is quite a bit lower than a 62, 62, 62, 80, a 68. Yeah, so it's avoiding this because it only lets you flow 50 through there. If we increase the infrastructure here, then it would probably flow through here because that would be significant, or it'd be sufficient and also shorter. Or if for some reason we couldn't support that much, we couldn't support up to 62, then the 50 might be enough, and then I think it might flow through there. No, even here, see, it's got a 30, and it's still flowing around because it's trying to flow things the best that it possibly can. As your country maybe gets bombed by strategic bombers and damages your infrastructure, other things change, the path that supplies take may change. It's also worth noting that at a certain point, see this? From here, it's going to flow over land, but from here, all of a sudden it changes to flowing via the sea. There is a port that we have over here on the east coast, right down there, and you see this dotted line? If we follow it all the way over here, through the Panama Canal, through the Bosphorus Strait, and onto this port in Crimea, this is how supplies would flow out to Japan. If I zoom way out and mouse over here, well, not Japan, but the eastern front, the Japanese front, you can see it'll flow through a bunch of provinces over here and then end up over there. Infrastructure determines how many supplies can flow through a province, as well as the naval port level. So over here, you can see that this port allows up to 27 supply to flow through it. Now, as I mouse over here, you can see that the one number is highlighted in red at any given point. The number in red is highlighting the bottleneck in getting supplies there. This doesn't mean there isn't enough. Like, we have some troops over here and they need a certain amount of supply. How many do they need? Well, we need 14. This province can supply up to 37 locally, and we only need 14. So we're good. We're well below the limit. We're okay. And the port here can accept up to 27 supplies per day. We're well under that. Although keep in mind, this 27, we've got 14 coming here, plus another 6 over here, plus another 1 over here. None there, none there. So we're currently, can we actually see what the total number is? Oh, requirements, 14.59. Oh, well, that's per province, though. I didn't know if we could see some sort of total that's flowing through this area. But in any case, we're okay. None of these guys have a shortage. If any place had a supply and shortage, this number would be in red. Your sort of your barrels and boxes, there would be a red over here to show, listen, there's not enough supply reaching this province to feed all of our troops. But on the right-hand side, that number in red just shows you what the potential bottleneck would be. If we want to make sure to increase the number of supplies in this province as much as possible, the thing we'd want to do is increase or level up our naval base, because that's the bottleneck over here. Whereas if we go all the way over, usually it's going to be whatever province we point at, because here this has only got a tiny bit of infrastructure, a skull limit of 3. This is an exception, though. The province that we're pointing at here, this supply zone, can have up to 62 goods flowing through it, but the incoming one has a limiter of 54. So if we needed to make sure to pack as much supply into this province as possible, we'd want to upgrade the infrastructure in this province over here. We could click this button, that would automatically open an infrastructure in an appropriate state. I said province a second ago, but I meant supply zone, and this would build infrastructure in an appropriate state within the supply zone. Words are hard, yo. So we've got that. And yeah, if you know that a bunch of supplies are going to be flowing out of a particular port, you want to make sure to level it up as much as possible. This one's level 10, which is already the max over here. Now, keep in mind, if you are sending any supplies overseas, it's possible that your enemies might have a bunch of, say, submarines in any of these sea zones along this entire ridiculously long path, and might be blowing up those convoys and preventing supplies from reaching the front, as well as decreasing your total convoys. We actually, as the Soviet Union here, only have 50 convoys currently. 39 of them are in use for either trading with other nations. If we set up a trade over here, depending on what we're trading, let's say we wanted to purchase some rubber, okay? We can see how many convoys would be required to import resources. So if we were to purchase rubber from the United States, it would take 4 convoy per trade, which is 8, right? You trade away 1 civilian factory, you get 8 things. That's how trade works. Well, for every 8 thing, we would need 4 convoys. For Brazil, because they're further away, we would need 6 convoys per 8 things. However, with British Malaya, because it's on the same landmass as we are, right? It's over here, British Malaya. We don't need convoys at all because it'll just ship over land, assuming there are no enemies in the way. If we go to war, if we're somehow at war with, say, Siam, then British Malaya won't be able to ship things over land anymore. Instead, it'll have to go by sea. So that might change your convoy requirement. As such, it may be quite common for you to be constantly building convoys. We haven't talked about ship production yet, but you can build ships with this button. And in particular, what you can do is you can build convoys over here, like that. You can assign dockyards. We'll talk about more when we talk about naval stuff, but you can assign some dockyards to this production. I often do a thing where I have one dockyard forever, like the little permanent symbol there. Like you can assign, whoops, a certain, I don't know why that's scrolling like that. It's very annoying. There you go. I'll talk about these filters later on here, but there you go. So you could set a number of convoys to build, but I often have one factory build infinite convoys for the entire game until I've got like hundreds in reserve. And depending on what nation you're playing, hundreds might not be enough. You might want 1,000 or more convoys. You're gonna have to like sort of play that by ear and learn by experience how many convoys you need. Mostly gonna depend a lot on how much overseas stuff you're doing. And how much manpower you've got to support overseas. So if you're Japan, you're going to need quite a bit. If you're the United States, you're going to need a lot of convoys to support your actions either in Europe or in Asia, for example. The Soviet Union, it's not as important, although we'd probably want some more convoys. You can see we're getting awfully short. If we want to trade more stuff, or if we are going to support troops overseas, hell, even these troops in Japan, we're going to need that. One of the things we could do to avoid having to ship goods overseas is we could build up the infrastructure along the route here. To remove some of these bottlenecks. Like you can see here, 10 and 18, that's very bottlenecky over here. 13 over here, that's probably one of the reasons that's a thing. So if we built up our infrastructure right along here, we could probably use just land transportation to get the supply to the front instead of convoys, which would be a lot more secure. Something to consider. Supplies, I think that covers all the supplies. Again, you don't have to build them manually. They're not like, they're not these, it's not support equipment. It happens automatically. It always flows out of the capital. And yeah, there's that. You can wait. You will get a warning over here on the right. I don't remember if it's next to a theater or down below here. I think it'll be next to a theater. You'll get a warning if there's someone who doesn't have enough supply along the way. That will happen very frequently as you're attacking. Because wherever, let me unpause here. Wherever you're attacking, as there's combat going on, and especially if you have bombers involved, you're very likely to blow up a lot of the infrastructure along the way, which will get damaged. See, these guys are all boxed in. Now, I'm talking about unit supply, right? Unit supply. So are these guys encircled? Yes. I mean, they have nowhere to retreat to, so if I keep attacking them, they will eventually get eliminated completely. But will these units over here, these Finnish units, will they ever run out of supply? In this case, the answer is yes, because they are cut off from their capital. There is no seaport here, right? There's no naval base, so they can't use ships to bring resources into this pocket, but there's also no victory point. All supplies flow out from your capital, okay? They flow out of the capital, but the amount of supply available in a province isn't exclusively based on supplies that ship out of your capital. Instead, provinces generate a certain amount of supply locally. And in particular, right over here, you can see this supply area can support up to 36 supply worth of dudes every day. And the reason it can support up to 36 dudes every day is because it produces 7 locally, and it can flow 26 from other locations. 29. 29 plus 7 is equal to 36. It produces 7 supply locally without having to transport anything. And the reason for that is there's a little bit of supply automatically happening here, and each victory point that is available in a state, and that generally comes from cities. So Vologda over here is a city. It generates, and it's worth a victory point. It generates some supply locally. So that can impact your ability. Let's say we were completely surrounded. Let's say we were in Leningrad, right? We're defending from the Germans over in Leningrad. Leningrad has a seaport in it, a naval base, which means we could get supplies by sea. You could have a big stack of units just sitting in Leningrad, otherwise completely surrounded, and those units might still have at full supplies because it's coming in by sea, right? We'd be shipping things out through the Black Sea, all around Europe, up into here into the Baltic, and then it would land in Leningrad and fully supply our troops with stuff. However, if the Germans start deploying subs anywhere along there and sinking all our convoys, now all of a sudden Leningrad wouldn't be able to get any supplies in from Moscow. And it would be entirely reliant on however much supply Leningrad's victory point by itself would generate, which would be a few points. So people in cities that are surrounded can generally, like, keep, a division, maybe more, maybe less, you know, maybe a very lightweight division only, depends on how much local supply it does, but it can sometimes supply a certain amount. The other thing is cities are, like urban provinces like this, really good at defending themselves. It's really hard to attack in the cities. But here we are fine. We're going to go ahead and just bop this stuff. There you go. You're coming in there. We're going to get the tanks to manually. I'm just going to tell them to finish this off. So you'll do a lot of these manual attacks here for some of these areas because they get a little funky. I'm going to tell you to just go and finish this area off because some troops, as these front lines get split up, troops still get assigned to these other front lines and things get confusing. So if we close this off, all the troops will go back to our quote-unquote real front. What I'm going to do with this tank here, I'm not going to have it just sit around in Viipuri. I'm going to have it run along to Helsinki. So anything that's worth a victory point leads to surrender. How do you win a war? Well, if we go ahead and look at war here, under Finland we can see this bar. This is the surrender progress, the capitulation progress. This is based on how many victory points they control. As they lose more and more of their victory points on their core land, it doesn't matter if they capture victory points like that belong to the Soviet Union. Them capturing victory points belonging to the Soviet Union mean the Soviet Union is going to start wanting to surrender. But it doesn't change Finland's desire to surrender. As we take more and more of their victory points away, they are going to want to surrender because we're taking over their country. The people are going to just give up. Depending on what their war support is, this will affect how quickly they might be willing to give up. If they have things like, if they have low war support, they're going to want to give up a lot sooner. But you can see here, it currently controls 87% of its victory points and will capitulate when it has 20% or less. Every province that's got a victory point has got this little square, or if it's the capital, it'll have a diamond here. And we're going to be able to find out how many victory points all these things are worth. If I can remember what map mode shows me those numbers. Oh, right over here. No, we're getting it. Okay. There we go. Helsinki is worth 15 victory points. This over here is worth 1. Over here, this is worth 1. This is worth 3 victory points. We've got a victory point up here that's worth 1. Some states might not have any victory points, but like I think each giant state might still be implicitly worth 1 or something like that. So even if you take all the obvious victory points, sometimes someone won't give up depending on how it's done. And it is based on a percentage of total victory points. So us taking Helsinki, that most of their victory points is all in Helsinki, and that's usually the case. Taking the capital usually ends the war. So what we're going to do is we're going to rush this this tank ahead to see if we can take Helsinki. If we could set up a really great naval invasion. That might have made the war a lot shorter. We could have used naval invasion. We've got a naval base in Leningrad. We could have dudes load them onto convoys and have them land on Helsinki and try to take it right away. The other thing, if we had transport planes and paratroopers, there we go, very appropriate, the technology screen would pop up now. If we had paratroopers, and we do have the technology, we could drop them using transport planes onto cities and maybe force a very, very quick surrender. It's risky because your paratroopers are going to land without much organization at all. It's very hard for them to land and instantly fight. But if they can land and instantly take a city, sometimes that ends the war right away. And in any case, because cities have victory points and therefore generate supply, your paratroopers can sit and hold that city. Even if they're not connected to the front, they can sit and hold that city surprisingly well if they've gotten an opportunity to regenerate their organization after landing. You do need actual paratroopers to do aerial drops. Let me double check that. Yeah, see, you need this icon here to allow a division to be parachuted. Basically, you can only have paratroopers. We probably have a design, for a paratrooper hero division. So this paratrooper division only has paratrooper battalions. If we were to add any other kind of battalion, so regular infantry, it's no longer able to do an airdrop. That would be bad. That being said, support companies are okay. We can add support artillery, we can add support engineers, it's still allowed to be dropped. So support companies are okay, but no different types of line battalions whatsoever. It's just pure paratroopers, that's all allowed to be in there. For naval invasions, it's different. Any kind of troop whatsoever can do a naval invasion. It's just that most troops will get a huge penalty to a naval invasion, whereas Marines... Why are there German tanks here? Oh, they must have gotten volunteers. Oh my. Interesting, we'll talk about that. Sorry, most people doing a naval invasion get a huge penalty to it. but Marine divisions get, they don't have as much of a penalty. It's still a little harder for them just fighting on land, but yeah, we don't actually have Marines unlocked, or I would show you that. I suppose we could start researching it. Maybe I'll show it in a future video, but I'll probably not remember. But yeah, if you're doing naval invasions, you'd rather do it with Marines because they're not going to get as much of a penalty. So Germany's not involved in this war per se. I'm not fighting Germany. It is me, plus my 2 little buddies over here, versus Finland alone. However, Germany has sent volunteers to Finland to fight on their behalf. So these are German units fighting on behalf of Finland. It looks like they've got three panzer divisions over here, which has stopped me from ninjaing Helsinki here. Again, these divisions are not very good at defense, but it's still enough for now. So what I'm going to do, rather than continue to attack until I run completely out of organization, and therefore be very vulnerable to counterattack, I'm going to stop this attack right now. You can do it a couple of different ways. You can just click on the province that you're in to stop the movement. Oh, I'm being attacked. I misread this. You see the arrow? I am being attacked by these guys. That's the reason I'm really losing, is because tanks are really bad at defending. If I were attacking these guys, because they have no organization, I bet you I would have just won. But I think they started the attack first, and that's bad for tanks. The other thing you can do is you can hit the H key, which is the same as this. This just cancels orders and basically tells your people to just sit around there and do nothing. Alright, I've got more vehicles coming here, which is good. I'm going to get you to come up this way, and then over here. Let me unpause and see what's going on here. That caught me very off guard. German panzers in Finland. They really don't want the Soviets to win. Okay, we've got some new weapon upgrades. That's good. These guys here, for example, they come into effect right away and just give you a bigger boost. I mean, you still have to research them. This is a year ahead of time. That's pretty damaging, so we're not going to do that. I think what we're going to do is we're going to go for doctrines. Doctrines do take a fairly long time to research, but they're super worthwhile because of their bonuses. So we'll go for pocket defense. I do have a bonus to 100%, so we will... This is experience from the border clash in Korea. Nice. So we'll research this faster. If you do have a bunch of experience, right, the army experience over here, then I don't even remember if I've talked about using this for the redesign. Anyway, then you can spend that to boost it quite a bit faster, but we'll just research it this way. Just in case I forgot to mention the experience. If you make changes to your division templates, it does cost you army experience to do that. So for example, if I wanted to put in line artillery over here, which I won't do because I don't have enough, you can see it would cost me 5 experience to go and make this change. Depending on what change you do and whatnot, the experience costs can vary a fair bit. But there you go. All right, let's unpause. So yeah, we'll, looks like we're holding here. Yeah, it's going to be okay. Oh, some of these guys are breaking off. We're going to do this. These tanks will sort of join the defense first, which again is not ideal. But okay, they've stopped attacking, which is good, because now we can attack, get huge bonuses, because we're going to be attacking and getting a bonus to attack, because tanks are good at it. They got huge breakthrough. And these guys are weak at defending, because tanks don't have much defense. They also have no organization, so this is going to be okay. One of the things I mentioned, right, let's say we've got a tank just sitting around here. If we want to have it assist in this combat, I could take this tank and I could just right-click on this province to tell it to move to this province, and that would get it to assist in the combat. However, I want to assist in the combat, but not actually move this unit. For example, when we win, any units that have been told to move into this province, after victory, will then move into that province. However, if I hold control, and you can see it in the tooltip here, control plus right-click, I will order this unit to assist in this combat. It will fight just like any other unit in here, but after the combat ends, it will stay in its current province rather than move. And that's what we're going to do here. We're just going to get it to go ahead and assist. There we are. And then it just stayed there, which is lovely. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it to move over here instead. And yeah, you're going to come in here, and we're just going to keep pushing. Helsinki's going to go down fairly quickly. The Spanish Civil War has started. Yeah, sometimes it starts a lot earlier than this. Really depends on the game. Yeah, you're going to be doing this. That's going to be an easy bop. Bop them. Actually, what I might have wanted to do is go for the surround, so that we could just eliminate it completely. That would be really nice. I'm not sure we're going to be able to pull that off. What I'm going to do with my tanks here, I'm going to, because we're in a pretty good shape, I'm going to just tell my tanks to, like, aggressively move forward by manually telling them to do this. If they get stopped for some reason, they will just revert to the actual battle plan, but for now they're going to do this. I'm going to grab the ones at the bottom here, though, and tell you to go here. Actually, do this, because what we're going to try to do is cut off this tank division completely, because they're sitting over here. It'd be nice to eliminate them fully by cutting them off from Turku. Turku's a city, so that would be supply, plus it would let them keep running up the coast. It's also got a naval port. But if we can go and stop him while he's still here or something like that, then we could eliminate that division completely, which is going to be one less tank division we're going to have to fight later on when we fight Germany, because almost certainly that's going to happen at some point. So we're just going to keep going here until we can get the Finns to give up. Oh, it looks like he did move back, so there's not going to be any cutoff here. But that's okay. And it's okay for us to leave a little bit of land behind. I'm going to take half of these. So by selecting those, there's a button here to then select half of the current selection, which is hotkey to S. So I'm going to leave some guys go down to Turku, and then the other guys are going to just run up the coast here to help take Vasa. So we're going to leave a lot of these little pockets behind. We have to be careful that our own troops don't get cut off at some point. So if you're doing these moves, you do want to be kind of careful. But generally speaking, this is going to be the right thing for us to do at this time. Especially, like, we're pretty good. Oh, this guy's going to get defeated, but that's okay. And again, north, if I was sort of manually running things over here, we might be able to push forward a little bit. But again, my intention with these forces here was, if all they did is hold the line, that would be fine. While my tanks took the south, which is where most of the victory points are. You can see, oh, Finland's. There we go. 99% towards capitulation. It controls 20% of victory points. It will capitulate when it has 20% or less. It might have like 20.1%. There could be rounding things and whatnot. We just take this victory point. If we take another one, it'll be that. It's possible that, yeah, we may need to like wipe out the last few bits of these outstanding provinces here. That might also make the difference. Oh, there it is. Here is our first peace conference, you guys. So this is the Treaty of Lappi. Finland has capitulated. If there were more fighters on the defensive side, Finland capitulating wouldn't bring up the peace conference. We would have to go and beat up everyone on the other side, right? Like, if we're Germany and we're fighting the Allies and then we force France to give up, that's not the end of World War II. You're still going to have to do the United Kingdom and Canada and India, and at some point the United States whenever they decide to get involved in the war. But in this case, it was only Finland on the defensive side, so as soon as they capitulated, we were able to negotiate peace. So, the peace screen, everyone who fought in the battle has a certain amount of contribution to the war score, and I wish I'd thought to show that off in the war screen before. So for, you know, as you do whatever in the combat, you earn a certain amount of points towards the peace treaty. So the people who did the most, A, get first crack at demanding things, and B, have more points to spend on taking stuff. So depending on how many countries are involved and whatever, there might be multiple rounds of this, because different things cost different amounts of money. There are multiple states in Finland here, and you can see these little star values. This is how much each state is worth in the peace deal. So if I want to take Karjala over here, it's 31 points. I have 198 to spend. If I click on that, there we go. I'd spend 31 of my points on this, and I can keep asking, but it's possible, it would be interesting if that were the case. Okay, I have enough points that I can take all of Finland. I've literally selected every single province over here. I'm going to just reset here. I've selected every province, and I can take any of them. But it's possible I wouldn't have enough. For example, let's say I could only take these 3 provinces, and then at this point, the end turn button, if I were to take one more, the end turn button would gray out. The reason for that is I wouldn't have enough points to take everything. And it's a little bit weird because you might still have some points left over, and it might still be grayed out, but it's because of the difference in the number of points between you and the guys in the next place. There needs to be a certain difference between you two left over for you to be able to keep taking provinces. So if you get confused why that is, that's just the way it is. Because what could happen here is, like, maybe I have enough victory points to take every single province, but the next guy has almost as many victory points as I do, and he's like, what the hell, dude? Like, you can't take everything. I did almost as much work. Just because you get to go first doesn't mean you get to take everything. So that's why it's implemented that way. So at that point, you might want to take things a little bit more strategically. On the screen, you do get to see how many resources are in various provinces. So for example, in the province of Lappi over here, there's 8 iron and 8 chrome. And over here in Savo, there's 4 iron. None of the other provinces have resources. However, you can see that the province of Uusimaa over here is 55 points, which is more than any of the other Finnish provinces. And why is that? Well, this, if you mouse over, you can see it's got a lot of buildings. So it's got 6 infrastructure, 3 military factories, 3 civilian factories, a level 5 airbase, as well as a naval dockyard. So you're going to be getting a lot of stuff from that. Whereas if we look at Karjala over here, it only has 1 military factory, 2 civilian factories, and some infrastructure, and that's it. So that's why Karjala is not worth as much as Usima in the peace deal over here. In addition to just taking territory, so we're taking stuff over here, you have a few other options. For example, I could choose, instead of conquering Finland and adding it to my country, so it would just be part of the Soviet Union period, I could instead puppet Finland. So by doing that, the country of Finland would still exist, but it would be a puppet of the Soviet Union. We would also install a friendly regime, which would make Finland communist, which will almost certainly change the name of the country of Finland. I think it would be like the Democratic Republic of Finland or something like that. So this is another possibility. Why might you want a puppet versus taking? There's all sorts of different pros and cons and things depending on like accessing. Okay. You don't get as much manpower from non-core provinces as from core provinces. It's sort of, I don't want to go into the nitty-gritty, but because, you know, the people here still consider themselves to be Finnish as opposed to properly Soviet, they are not going to be quite as enthusiastic about joining the Soviet military. So you don't get as much manpower because this isn't part of our core nation. On the other hand, so if we just swallow up Finland, we don't get as much manpower as we might like, but we still get access to any of its supplies. So if it was a really oil-rich province, we really needed a ton of oil, then we would want to swallow it up so we'd have access to that oil locally to ourselves. In this case, because Finland doesn't have that many resources and doesn't even have that many factories for us to take advantage of, we actually might be tempted to just puppet it, because your puppets will contribute military to you. You can even you can build units out of your puppets and various things like that. There's like a few different ways that you can recruit the troops from your puppets, and so you're using their manpower, and you would get to have access to all of their manpower because it would be Finland using Finland's own cores to get maximum manpower and therefore feeding back into you. Mostly, I just like to take everything. Conquering tends to be a little cheaper. This little conquer here is because I had a specific war goal to conquer, and this is reminding me of my conquer war goal. That's to take Karjal over here. I think, and again, this is one of those areas where I'm like not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure we're either getting a discount to taking Karjal because we have a war goal on it, or it would be more expensive for someone else to take it because we have a war goal on it and they don't. Something like that, I think, might be the case. But whether we click the conquer here, or, let me reset here, or we click Take Karjala, either way it's worth 31 points. Anyway, in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this button that says Take All States. We've taken all the states. I'm going to go ahead and end turn. And there's nothing else to take, because normally it'd be you take turns back and forth until there's nothing left to take, and you can hit done. There was an option to pass. If you take nothing and you pass, you actually gain points. So let's say there's a piece of land you really want, but you can't afford it. You don't have enough points. The game won't let you take it. Instead of taking something crappy and then ending the turn, if you take nothing and pass, it'll actually give you more points so that maybe on your next turn you'll be able to take it. But you're taking a risk that someone else might, steal it from under you. So anyway, that's a little thing. Anyway, we're gonna hit done here. It's gonna calculate the effects. And just like that, we have access to all of Finland. That's part of the Soviet Union now. We are just done. So we're gonna wrap this up here. I think we still have to do an episode where we look at the various things on the political screen, as well as the decision screen over here. And we also have to talk about navies. But so that'll be next time. Thank you very much for watching, folks. I'll see you then.